You wake up before the sun. The alarm screams at you from the nightstand, that jarring sound that pulls you out of sleep before your body is ready, before your mind is ready, before you're ready to face another day of the same routine you've been living for years. You drag yourself out of bed, half awake, half anxious, that low-grade dread already settling into your chest before you've even brushed your teeth. The feeling that follows you everywhere now. The feeling that something is fundamentally wrong, but you can't quite name it. Coffee. Black, strong, necessary. Not because you enjoy it, but because you need it to function, to get through what's coming. Commute, traffic or train, or both. 40 minutes or an hour or more of your life spent traveling to a place you don't particularly want to be. Time that doesn't count as work, but isn't yours either. Liminal time. Stolen time. Time that just evaporates from your life with nothing to show for it. Clock in. Literally or metaphorically. The moment you enter the building, open your laptop, start checking emails. The moment you stop being a person and become a resource. Human capital. A line item on a budget spreadsheet. 8 hours. Maybe 10. Maybe 12 if you count the lunch you eat at your desk while answering emails. The meetings that accomplish nothing. The deadlines that multiply faster than you can meet them. The performance reviews where you're evaluated on metrics that have nothing to do with actual value and everything to do with visibility and politics and whether your face fits the culture. Emails. Endless emails. Requests disguised as questions. Demands disguised as collaboration. Urgency manufactured to justify someone else's poor planning. Your inbox as a to-do list you never consented to, managed by everyone except you. Fake smiles. Professional voice. The version of yourself you've constructed to survive in this environment. The performance of enthusiasm. The performance of engagement. The performance of giving a damn about quarterly targets and synergy and core values that mean nothing. Then you clock out, if you're lucky. If there's not another crisis, another fire to put out, another quick question that turns into an hour of unpaid labor because salary means they own you beyond the official hours. You go home. You collapse. On the couch, in front of the TV, scrolling your phone, too tired to do anything meaningful, but too wired to actually rest. Your evening evaporates. Dinner, maybe some time with family if you have the energy, maybe some attempt at a hobby you used to enjoy before you were too exhausted to care. And then sleep. Not enough sleep. Never enough sleep. Because you have to wake up in a few hours and do it all again. And somehow, at the end of all that, at the end of the week, the month, the year, you're still broke. Have you ever felt like you're working harder just to stand still? Not destitute, not homeless, but broke in the sense that you're not getting ahead. Broke in the sense that you're living paycheck to paycheck despite doing everything you were told would lead to stability. Broke in the sense that one unexpected expense, one medical emergency, one car breakdown could unravel everything. You did everything right. You went to school. You got the degree they said you needed. You got the job. You worked hard. You stayed loyal. You showed up every day. You played by the rules. You did what responsible adults are supposed to do. And still, you're trapped. Trapped in what feels like an invisible cage. A cage made not of bars but of obligations and expenses and debt, and the constant fear that if you stop running, everything will collapse. You can see out of the cage. You can see the people who seem free. The rich, the investors, the entrepreneurs, the influencers, the ones who somehow made it, who travel when they want, who work when they want, who don't wake up with that dread in their chest, who've escaped. You can see the life you thought hard work would buy, the house that isn't bleeding you dry with rent or mortgage payments, the car that's paid off, the savings account that has more than 3 digits. The ability to say no to a job that's destroying you without worrying about how you'll eat. but you can't reach it. You can't seem to bridge the gap between where you are and where they are. No matter how hard you work, no matter how many extra hours you put in, no matter how many side hustles you start and abandon because you're too exhausted to sustain them. Because no matter how hard you work, you're stuck. Stuck, earning just enough to survive, but never enough to escape. Stuck in the wage cage. If that hits you, if you've ever looked at your paycheck and thought, how is this all I get for everything I give? How am I doing all this and still barely making it? Comment, yes. Because that moment of realization, that moment when you see the disconnect between effort and reward, is the first crack in the cage. It's the moment you start to see that the problem isn't you. The problem isn't that you're not working hard enough, or smart enough, or strategically enough. The problem is the system, the structure, the game itself. For decades, generations, we were told a story. A simple, powerful story that shaped how most of us think about work and reward and what we're supposed to do with our lives. Work hard, be responsible, stay loyal to your employer, show up every day, do your job well, don't complain, don't cause trouble, be reliable, be productive, be a good employee. And one day, if you do all that, you'll be rewarded. You'll buy the house with the white picket fence and the lawn and the garage. You'll raise the family in stability and comfort. You'll take vacations. You'll have weekends that are actually yours. You'll build savings. You'll retire with dignity and security. You'll have earned the American dream through honest labor and discipline. That story was real once. For some people. In a specific moment in history, mostly in the decades following World War II in America. A brief, unusual period when productivity gains were shared relatively broadly, when unions had power, when a single income could support a middle-class family, when pensions existed, when housing was affordable relative to wages, when college didn't require decades of debt, when healthcare didn't bankrupt people. That moment, that golden age that older generations reference when they tell you to just work harder, was an anomaly. A specific set of historical circumstances that created unusually favorable conditions for workers. High demand for labor, strong unions, progressive taxation, government investment in infrastructure and education. A global economy still recovering from war that gave American industry massive advantages. But the world changed. Globalization, automation, financialization, union busting, deregulation, tax cuts for the wealthy, wage stagnation, asset inflation. The transformation of the economy from one centered on production and labor to one centered on extraction and rent-seeking. The deal changed, but no one told you. The same advice keeps getting repeated. Just work harder. Just be more disciplined. Just make better choices. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. As if the problem is you, your work ethic, your choices, your discipline. As if trying harder will overcome structural changes that have nothing to do with individual effort. But you can't outwork a rigged system. You can't save your way out of an economy built on debt, designed inflation, and systemic wage suppression. You can't climb a ladder when the ladder has been quietly removed from the wall and replaced with a treadmill that goes nowhere, no matter how fast you run. You can't outwork a treadmill. Hard work still builds character. Hard work still matters for personal growth, for skill development, for self-respect. But it doesn't build freedom anymore. Not the way it used to. Not reliably. Not for most people. Because the system doesn't reward labor anymore. It rewards leverage. Let's talk about what happened. How we got here. Because understanding history helps clarify that this isn't natural, isn't inevitable, isn't how things have to be. Once upon a time, specifically during the mid-20th century in the United States, wages grew with productivity. When workers produced more value per hour, they earned more per hour. The benefits of increased efficiency and output were shared relatively broadly between workers and owners. One paycheck could support a family. A single income could pay for a house, a car, food, healthcare, occasional vacations, college for the kids, and retirement savings. Unions were strong. About a third of American workers were union members in the 1950s. Unions negotiated for better wages, better benefits, safer conditions, job security. They had leverage. Taxes on the wealthy were high. Top marginal tax rates reached 90% in the 1950s and 1960s. Wealth was redistributed through progressive taxation and public investment. Then, starting around the 1970s, everything changed. Productivity kept climbing. Output per hour kept increasing. Technology improved efficiency. Workers produced more value than ever before. Corporate profits soared. Businesses were more profitable than they'd been in decades. Shareholders earned record returns. But wages flatlined. Worker compensation stopped growing with productivity. The line that had tracked together for decades, productivity up, wages up, split. Productivity continued rising, wages stayed flat, the gap widened, and it's never closed. They don't want you free, they want you dependable. Why? Globalization. Companies could offshore production to countries with lower wages and weaker labor protections. Automation replaced workers. Financialization shifted the economy from making things to trading financial instruments. Union busting systematically weakened worker power. Deregulation removed protections. Tax cuts concentrated wealth at the top. The result? A systematic transfer of wealth and power from workers to owners, from people who earn wages to people who own assets, from labor to capital. So you work harder. Technology makes you more productive. Your employer makes more profit from your labor than ever before. But you don't see those gains. They flow to shareholders, to executives, to owners of capital who benefit from your productivity without contributing additional labor. You get a 3% raise while productivity gains deliver 20% returns to investors. And every headline tells you the economy is booming, unemployment is low, things are great. Maybe for someone, just not for you. Drop a cage if you've seen this pattern where effort doesn't match reward. Here's how the cage works, step by step, mechanism by mechanism. You sell your time for money. That's the basic transaction of wage labor. You have 24 hours in a day. 8 of them, maybe more, you sell to an employer. They pay you a wage, hourly or salary, in exchange for your time, your effort, your skills, your attention, your obedience to their directions during those hours. That wage is fixed or grows very slowly. You might get raises, 2 or 3% a year if you're lucky. But those raises are incremental. They don't fundamentally change your financial position. Meanwhile, that wage buys less every year, because inflation eats it. The official inflation number might say 2 or 3%, but the real costs you face, housing, healthcare, education, childcare, food, transportation, often rise faster. The harder you work, the tighter the cage gets. Your rent rises, your groceries rise, your insurance, your healthcare, your utilities, everything rises. But your pay barely moves. You get a raise, 3%. Inflation, 5 or 6. You're technically making more, but in reality, you're poorer. You've just been given a slightly bigger hamster wheel. Meanwhile, everything you need, housing, education, transportation, requires debt. Mortgages, student loans, car loans, credit cards. You borrow to live, and then you work to pay off the borrowing. Every paycheck passes through a network of corporate toll booths, taxes, health insurance premiums, retirement contributions if you're lucky, loan payments, student loans, car loans, mortgage, credit card minimums, subscriptions you signed up for and forgot about, utilities, insurance, on and on. What's left? After rent or mortgage, after debt payments, after necessities, after the 100 small extractions that happen automatically before you even see your money, what's left? For most people, not much. Maybe nothing. Maybe negative. requiring more credit card debt to bridge the gap to the next paycheck. You're told to invest what's left over, to put money in retirement accounts, to buy stocks, to build wealth through ownership. That's how the wealthy got wealthy, after all, through ownership of assets that appreciate. But what's left over to invest? When you're spending everything just covering survival? When there's no surplus after basic costs? When you're one emergency away from financial crisis? You're middle class in name and aspiration, but you're living paycheck to paycheck. You have just enough comfort to not riot. Just enough stability to feel like you can't risk losing what you have. Just enough to make you afraid of anything that might disrupt your precarious balance. That's the design. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. To keep you productive, compliant, dependent, and just stable enough not to revolt. To keep you showing up. To keep you working. To keep you consuming. To keep you paying interest and rent and fees to people who own the structures you're trapped inside. It's not that work doesn't matter. It's not that your labor has no value. It's that work alone, wage labor, selling your time for money, doesn't translate into freedom anymore. Not in an economy where ownership compounds while wages stagnate. Not when the benefits of productivity gains flow overwhelmingly to capital owners rather than to workers. Not when every structure is designed to extract value from your labor while leaving you with just enough to survive and return tomorrow. That's the cage. And most people don't see it as a cage because it doesn't look like the cages we imagine. It looks like normal adult life. Like responsibility. Like what you're supposed to do. But when you step back and look at the structure, at how wealth accumulates, at where productivity gains go, at who benefits from your labor, and who just barely survives despite providing it, the cage becomes visible. But the worst part of the wage cage isn't financial. It's psychological. It's what it does to your mind, your sense of self, your relationship with your own life. You start believing it's your fault. You internalize the struggle. You look at people who seem to be doing better, who own homes, who travel, who seem financially secure, and you assume they're just working harder, making better choices, being more disciplined than you are. So you try harder, you take overtime, you pick up side gigs, you embrace hustle culture, you sacrifice sleep to build something on the side. You sacrifice health, eating poorly, skipping exercise, ignoring stress. You sacrifice relationships, missing time with family and friends because you're always working or too exhausted to show up fully. You optimize every minute. You monetize every skill. You turn every hobby into a potential income stream. You live in a state of constant productivity, constant striving, constant effort to get ahead. And when you're still struggling, when the side hustle doesn't take off, when the overtime barely covers the increased costs, when you're more exhausted but no more free, you assume you failed. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't want it badly enough. You didn't execute properly. You made mistakes. It's your fault. But you didn't fail. The system shifted the goalposts. The rules changed. The deal you were promised doesn't exist anymore. And they want you to believe it's your fault, so you keep trying harder instead of questioning why effort doesn't translate to reward the way it used to. They want you exhausted, because exhausted people don't organize. They don't question. They don't have the energy to see the bigger picture. They're too busy surviving to think about how the system works. They want you compliant, because compliant people show up. They do what they're told. They don't make waves. They accept whatever terms are offered because they're afraid of losing what little stability they have. They want you too busy to notice that the richest people don't work harder. They own harder. They own the assets you rent. They own the real estate you pay rent or mortgage interest on. They own the debt you're servicing, your student loans, your car loans, your credit cards. They own the companies that employ you, that extract your labor and call it productivity while paying you a fraction of the value you create. They own the platforms you use, the subscriptions you pay for, the infrastructure of modern life that charges you fees for participation. They even own the data about how you spend the wages they just paid you, selling that data to other companies that want to extract more value from you. You work, they extract. You create value, they capture it. You tire, they profit. You get older, they replace you. You retire, if you're lucky. And they collect returns from pension funds invested in the same financial markets your labor fed for decades. That's the wage cage. Not a conspiracy, not a secret plot, a structure. An elegant, legal, openly operating machine built to convert your labor into leverage and wealth for people who own things. Built to ensure that working hard keeps you working, not free. And the psychological trap is believing that if you just try harder, optimize better, hustle more, you can beat a system that's structurally designed to keep you in place. You can't positive think your way out of structural inequality. You can't manifest your way out of wage stagnation. You can't grind your way out of a system where ownership compounds and labor stagnates. Individual effort matters. But individual effort can't overcome systemic dynamics. And convincing you that it can, that everything is up to your personal choices and work ethic, is how the system maintains itself. By individualizing what are actually collective, structural problems. So let's talk about the modern illusion of progress. The ways the system maintains the appearance that things are getting better even as your material conditions stagnate or decline. They give you distractions instead of progress. New phone models every year. Streaming services with infinite content. 2-day shipping. Convenience. Novelty. A constant stream of dopamine hits designed to make the cage look comfortable, even enjoyable. You can buy more stuff than ever before. Cheap electronics, fast fashion, mass-produced furniture. But you can't buy the things that actually matter for security and freedom. You can't buy affordable housing. You can't buy accessible healthcare. You can't buy education without decades of debt. You can't buy time or autonomy or the ability to say no to work that degrades you. They give you perks instead of pay. Office perks became trendy in the tech industry and spread to other sectors. Coffee bars in the office, free snacks, casual dress codes, flexible hours, work from home options, foosball tables, beer on Fridays. These things are nice. Some of them genuinely improve quality of life, but they're also distractions. They're meant to make you feel valued, to make your confinement feel like culture, to make the office feel like a fun place you want to be, rather than a place you're trapped extracting value for someone else. And crucially, they're cheap for employers. Much cheaper than meaningful raises, much cheaper than real profit sharing, much cheaper than building an ownership stake for workers. A coffee machine and some beanbags cost nothing compared to actually sharing the wealth that labor creates. They gamify loyalty. Employee of the Month programs, performance rankings, culture fit assessments. They give you digital gold stars, public recognition, the empty satisfaction of being the best prisoner in the cell block. Meanwhile, they cut real benefits. Pensions disappeared, replaced by 401ks that shift risk from employers to employees. Healthcare gets more expensive with higher deductibles and narrower networks. Paid time off shrinks. Job security evaporates. At-will employment means they can fire you anytime for any reason or no reason. They call you family in company meetings while planning the next round of layoffs. They talk about purpose and mission and changing the world, while optimizing every decision for quarterly earnings to please shareholders. They say, "We're all in this together," while executives make 300 times what the average worker makes. They ask for loyalty while offering none in return. They want you committed to the company while they remain committed only to profit. They frame employment as partnership while maintaining all the power in the relationship. You can't retire on company culture. You can't build wealth with free pizza and ping pong tables. You can't send your kids to college on the emotional satisfaction of being part of a mission-driven team. You can't keep a roof over your head with flexible work arrangements that just mean you're available to work all the time. And yet most people stay. Most people accept these terms. Most people continue working in conditions that don't lead to financial freedom or security. Why? Because the alternative feels scarier. Because quitting without another job lined up means losing healthcare, losing income, potentially losing housing. Because the job market is uncertain and competitive. Because you have bills that can't wait for you to find your passion or build your own thing. Because the cage, for all its problems, feels predictable. It feels stable, even when it's not actually providing stability. It feels like the responsible choice. It feels like what adults do. And that's how the trap sustains itself. Fear of instability keeps people chained to guaranteed mediocrity. Fear of losing what little you have keeps you from risking anything to get more. The cage offers just enough comfort to make escape feel like foolish risk rather than necessary liberation. Let's talk about why freedom feels impossible. Why, even when you can see the cage, even when you understand the structure, it still feels like there's no way out. Here's the harsh truth. The system doesn't want free people. Free people are unpredictable. Free people say no. Free people demand better terms. Free people leave jobs that exploit them. Free people organize. Free people question. Free people are threats to systems built on compliance. What the system wants is dependable earners. People who show up. People who produce. People who consume. People who service their debts. People who stay in their lane. People whose lives are predictable and monetizable. Freedom isn't productive. Not for them. Freedom doesn't pay quarterly dividends. Freedom doesn't generate interest payments on debt. Freedom doesn't clock in reliably. Freedom doesn't accept terms without negotiation. Freedom doesn't maximize shareholder value. So they structure everything to make freedom feel impossible. To make dependence feel inevitable. To make the wage cage feel like the only realistic option. They need you to believe that the next promotion is the answer, that the next certification, the next degree, the next skill set will finally be enough to break through, that the next side hustle, the next investment, the next opportunity will be the one that changes everything, because that keeps you running, that keeps you hoping, that keeps you productive inside the cage, striving for a breakthrough that the system is designed to keep perpetually just out of reach. The promotion comes with more responsibility, but barely more pay. The certification doesn't lead to better opportunities because everyone else got the same certification, and now it's just the new minimum requirement. The side hustle fails because you're too exhausted from your main job to build it properly. The investment returns are eaten by inflation and fees, but you keep trying because they've convinced you that the problem is you, not the system. That you just need to work smarter, optimize better, try harder. That freedom is possible if you just figure out the right combination of efforts. But the key to the cage isn't more work. The key isn't grinding harder or optimizing better. The key is awareness, understanding, seeing the structure clearly enough to navigate it consciously rather than unconsciously. The key is realizing that your labor is not the problem. Your effort is not the problem. You are not the problem. The structure is the problem. The distribution of power and wealth is the problem. The fact that productivity gains flow to owners while workers' wages stagnate is the problem. This isn't about quitting, it's about seeing. Now, this isn't a call to quit your job tomorrow. That's not realistic for most people. Most people have bills, dependents, obligations that require steady income. Walking away without a plan is more likely to lead to crisis than to freedom. But it is a call to stop confusing employment with empowerment, to stop believing that working harder at your job will automatically lead to freedom, to stop accepting the narrative that if you're not getting ahead, it's because you're not trying hard enough. You can work a job, even love your job, find it meaningful and fulfilling, while still understanding that real freedom doesn't come primarily from wages. It comes from leverage, from ownership, from structures that work for you rather than you working for them. Leverage means ownership. Ownership of your time, the ability to say no, to choose how you spend your hours. Ownership of your skills, portable abilities that aren't tied to a single employer. Ownership of your creations, intellectual property, content, products that can generate income without requiring your constant active labor. Ownership of your audience, people who know, trust, and value what you offer, who you can reach directly without gatekeepers. Ownership of assets, property, investments, businesses that appreciate in value or generate passive income, or both. Ownership of anything that compounds while you sleep instead of decaying while you work. That's the fundamental distinction. Wage labor decays, your energy depletes, your time disappears, you trade it for money that immediately gets spent on survival. Ownership compounds, assets appreciate, investments grow, skills and reputation build on themselves. You don't have to be rich to start building ownership. You don't have to have capital. You can start small. You can start with your attention and your time outside of work. You can start building skills that are yours, not your employer's. You can start creating things that might have value beyond the hours you put into them. You can start learning about how money and economics actually work, not how you were told they work. You can start understanding asset classes, investment vehicles, tax strategies. You can start thinking about money as a tool rather than as a scarce resource you're always chasing. You just have to stop believing the wage cage is normal. Stop believing that trading time for money is the only way, or even the primary way, to build economic security. Stop measuring your value in hours worked and start measuring it in autonomy gained. Because when you see the cage, when you really see it, understand its structure, recognize its mechanisms, you can start designing your way out. Not overnight, not dramatically, but piece by piece, step by step, through knowledge, through skill building, through creating, through ownership, through refusing to spend your entire life trading time for survival. Let's talk about the emotional exit from the wage cage. Because the physical exit, quitting your job, becoming financially independent, may take time, may take years, may never be complete. But the emotional exit can begin immediately. The emotional exit is the shift in mindset. The moment you stop believing that hard work automatically equals freedom. The moment you stop internalizing the struggle as personal failure. The moment you stop accepting the terms of wage labor as natural and inevitable. That shift doesn't require money. It doesn't require quitting. It doesn't require dramatic life changes. It just requires seeing clearly. Understanding the structure. Recognizing that you're not failing at a fair game. You're playing a rigged game while being told it's fair. The day you stop believing work harder equals freedom, you stop running in circles. You stop optimizing for someone else's metrics. You stop sacrificing everything for incremental gains that don't actually improve your material conditions. You start learning. Not just skills for your job, but knowledge about systems, about economics, about how wealth is actually built, about options you didn't know existed because you were too busy grinding to look up and see the bigger picture. You start building. Not just performing labor for wages, but creating things that might have lasting value. Content, products, services, relationships, reputation. Things that might compound rather than just exchanging your time for money that disappears. You start questioning, not in a cynical way, but in a clear-eyed way. Is this job actually serving my long-term interests, or just my immediate need for a paycheck? Is this path leading somewhere I want to go, or am I just following the script I was given? Am I making conscious choices or unconscious ones? You start creating. Not waiting for permission, not waiting for the perfect moment, not waiting until you have more time or energy or resources. You start small, with what you have, building in the margins, exploring possibilities, and every small act of reclaiming time, energy, and thought is a crack in the wage cage. Every hour you spend learning instead of mindlessly consuming. Every skill you build that's yours, not your employer's. Every dollar you save or invest instead of spending on consumption. Every boundary you set that protects your time and energy. Every moment you choose consciousness over autopilot. Every moment you recognize you have agency, even within constraints. Every moment you design your life intentionally instead of just accepting default terms. That's freedom growing. Not complete freedom, not immediate freedom, but degrees of freedom. Movement toward autonomy, even while still participating in wage labor out of necessity. They can own your time for now. Employment may be necessary for your survival currently. But they can't own your mind once you see the bars of the cage. Once you understand the structure, you can navigate it strategically rather than just being swept along by it unconsciously. You can work your job while building something else. You can earn wages while acquiring assets. You can play the game while understanding it's a game with rules designed to benefit others more than you. You can participate without believing. You can comply without surrendering your awareness. And that awareness, that clarity about what's actually happening, about how the system works and who it serves, is the foundation of every other form of freedom. Because you can't escape a trap you don't see. You can't solve a problem you misdiagnose. You can't change a situation you believe is entirely your fault. But once you see it, once you really see the wage cage for what it is, understand its mechanics, recognize that your struggle isn't personal failure, but structural design, everything changes. Not immediately in material terms, but immediately in psychological terms. You stop carrying shame that doesn't belong to you. You stop believing you're not working hard enough when you're already exhausted. You stop accepting exploitation as normal. You stop thinking freedom is something you don't deserve or can't achieve. You start seeing possibilities. You start recognizing leverage. You start understanding that the game is rigged, but there are still moves you can make, still choices you can exercise, still ways to improve your position even within an unfair system. That shift, from unconscious acceptance to conscious navigation, is everything. It's the difference between being trapped and not knowing you're trapped, versus understanding your constraints and working strategically within and around them. It's the difference between believing the cage is your fault versus recognizing it's a structure imposed on you that you didn't design and didn't consent to, but must navigate anyway. It's the difference between hopelessness and agency, between I'm failing and the system is designed this way, between shame and clarity, clear sight, accurate understanding, freedom from illusions about how things work, is the first and most essential form of freedom, because every other form of freedom starts there. With seeing what's actually true instead of what you've been told is true. Here's what you need to remember when the weight of it all feels overwhelming. When you look at the structure and feel powerless. When you understand the cage but don't see a way out. You're not alone. Tens of millions of people are living this exact experience. They're working harder than their parents did and have less to show for it. They're doing everything right according to the script they were given and still struggling. They feel trapped in the same cage you're seeing. That shared experience, that collective reality, is power waiting to be organized. Every person who sees the cage clearly is a potential ally in changing it. Every conversation that breaks the silence is a crack in the system's foundation. You're not failing. The system is designed this way. Your struggle isn't evidence of personal inadequacy. It's evidence that you're trying to achieve security and freedom within a structure that makes both increasingly difficult for people who work for wages. Understanding that distinction between personal failure and structural design frees you from shame that serves no purpose except keeping you compliant and isolated. You have more power than you think, not infinite power, not enough to snap your fingers and escape the cage, but real power in the form of choices, boundaries, awareness, refusal to accept terms that don't serve you. The power to say no. The power to set boundaries. The power to learn. The power to build. The power to connect with others. The power to refuse to work harder for people who won't share the rewards. the power to protect your time and energy, the power to see clearly and think strategically. That power compounds over time. Small choices accumulate into different paths. Small boundaries protect space for growth. Small acts of building create foundations for larger structures. This is survivable. People survive and eventually escape wage traps all the time. Not everyone. Not easily. Not through individual merit alone. Luck and circumstances and systemic advantages play huge roles. But it happens. Survival is possible. Degrees of freedom are achievable. And even if complete escape takes years, or never fully happens, living consciously within the cage is infinitely better than living unconsciously. Making strategic choices is better than just accepting default terms. Seeing clearly is better than being blind. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have a perfect plan. You don't have to know exactly how to get from here to freedom. You just have to start. Start seeing. Start thinking differently. Start making different choices. Start building whatever small forms of ownership and leverage are possible for you. The cage isn't permanent. Structures change. Systems evolve. Power shifts. What seems inevitable today wasn't inevitable in the past and won't be inevitable in the future. But change starts with clarity, with seeing what's actually happening instead of what you've been told is happening, with refusing to accept that this is natural or fair or your fault. And then it continues with choices, with boundaries, with building, with connecting, with refusing to spend your life on terms that don't serve you, with protecting what matters while navigating what's necessary. That's how you begin the exit. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with perfect knowledge, not with abundant resources, but with clarity, with awareness, with conscious choice, with refusal to participate unconsciously in your own exploitation. So here's what I want you to take from this. The wage cage is real. It's not in your head. It's not your fault. It's a structure built through specific policy choices and power dynamics that systematically transfer wealth from workers to owners. Hard work still matters. Skill still matters. Effort still matters. But they're not sufficient for freedom in an economy designed this way. You can't individually work your way out of structural problems, but you can see clearly. You can understand the dynamics. You can make strategic choices. You can protect yourself. You can build toward whatever forms of ownership and autonomy are possible within your circumstances. You can refuse to let the system consume your consciousness even while you participate in it out of necessity. You can work for wages while understanding that's not your path to freedom. You can be employed while building something else. You can play the game while seeing it's rigged. And you can connect with others who see what you see. You can break the silence. You can share understanding. You can build collective awareness that might eventually become collective power, that might eventually change the structures that cage us all. The first step out of the cage is knowing it exists, seeing its bars, understanding its mechanisms, recognizing that you're not failing at a fair system. You're trapped in an unfair one that you were told was fair. You've taken that first step. You see it now. You understand. You recognize the cage for what it is. Now comes the next step. Living consciously within it while building towards something beyond it. Making strategic choices instead of unconscious ones. Protecting what matters while navigating what's necessary. Refusing to accept terms that don't serve you. Building whatever forms of freedom are possible, piece by piece, day by day. That's the path. Not perfect, not easy, not guaranteed, but possible, real, achievable in degrees if not always in totality. They built a cage, but they can't cage your mind once you see the structure. They can't stop you from thinking differently, from making strategic choices, from protecting your time and energy, from building toward autonomy. They can make it hard. They can stack obstacles. They can design systems that default toward keeping you trapped. but they can't make it impossible. Not completely. Not if you see clearly, think strategically, act consciously, and refuse to believe that the cage is all there is. So see it, understand it, refuse to accept it as natural, and start building whatever small cracks in its walls you can create with the tools and time and resources you have. That's how you begin. That's the exit. Not a dramatic escape, but a gradual building toward freedom through awareness, choice, and refusal to participate unconsciously in your own confinement. The cage is real, but so is your power to see it, to navigate it consciously, and to build towards something beyond it. That's where freedom begins, with seeing, with understanding, with refusing to accept that this is how things have to be. You see it now. You understand. That's the first crack in the cage. What you do with that crack, that's up to you. This has been educational content about economic structures and labor dynamics, not financial, legal, or employment advice. Economic systems are complex, and individual situations vary widely. Always consult qualified professionals before making major financial or career decisions. If this perspective helped you see things differently, consider subscribing for more analysis like this.